Today we are speaking to Mr. Chandrashekhar Tilak, well-known economist, about Budget 2016. Major thrust of this budget is on rural spending. Will this revive the rural economy?
Let us be very clear and honest, and sincere attempt has been made as far as this budget is concerned to have some rural thrust to it. As all of us are aware that as far as our country is concerned, for last 2-3 years we were plagued with bad monsoon. It has not only affected the rural agricultural production per se, but it has resulted into a huge rural unemployment per se. Because even otherwise, when we say that our economy or a national economy is agrarian sector dominated, it is basically more on account of the number of persons involved. Under such circumstances, the rural problem was not only reduced agricultural growth, but the reduced agricultural employment as well. And if you have to battle any global crisis as we battled in 2008, it was very clear that our national economy was able to sustain 2008 crisis because whatever we were able to produce within the country was getting consumed within the country. And as far as this local consumption is concerned, the rural population contributes the most. To a great extent in certain commodity, it is even more than the urban sector. If you take this into a consideration, then certainly 3-4 measures which have been associated as far as this budget is concerned are quite worth mentioning. It may start from giving certain direct amount to the Gram Panchayats, which will result into good drinking water facilities and other sanitation facilities. Then there is a specific thrust as far as the road transport is concerned into the rural area. That would have a twofold impact. Number one, construction of roads in that particular field is generally done by the help of a local labor. As I said that earlier, disguised employment kind or disguised unemployment kind of a scenario which is in the agricultural sector or in a rural sector will be taken care of by this allocation as far as the road development is concerned, number one. Number two, over a period of time, once these roads get operational, the perishable commodities which are produced by the agricultural and rural sector can be transported easily. Inflation in any field of our economy, starting from electricity to the consumables, is basically more because of a distribution rather than of a production angle. But one can't forget a role being played by the e-market, that of a price formation, number one, and connecting the buyer, ultimate buyer and the ultimate seller directly without the help of a minimum, with the help of a minimum of a middleman invested or interested into the party. That not only reduces the cost of transaction, but it also advances the possibilities. Harvest-fed or rain-fed areas in our country are much more. And no budget can provide for a rain. Budget can provide for a rain-affected problems. It is going to be a corrective action. It can't be a proactive action. Another provision which has been considered as far as this budget is concerned, the amount wise it may sound insignificant because as far as the crop insurance is concerned, hardly 5,000 to 5,500 crores have been provided. But over here, two underlying facts need to be understood very clearly. The average age of Indian farmer is 63 years of age, and it is the highest as far as the global standards are concerned. At the age of 63, asking or expecting a particular person with a piecemeal of landholding records as far as our country is concerned to go for a new technique would involve a huge persuasion, and certainly certain social counseling or a financial counseling will be need to be done. And number two, as far as the producers in our country are concerned, whether they are producing rice, whether they are producing wheat, or whether they are producing cereal, especially in these three major commodities, only 5% of these crop producers are resorting to the crop insurance in our country. Knowing this particular phenomena, the insurance coverage, if necessary, can be enhanced subsequently. But first, we will have to ensure that we do train people to move towards it. But all these things taken together, especially the concept like e-market, concept like a cash cropping, would certainly reduce the age of farmers, and that would automatically lead to innovation. But if you look at yesterday's presentation, the initial 25 to 28 minutes of a finance minister's speech were on agriculture. Almost 23 to 28% of expenditure as provided in this budget is on agriculture. So certainly we have every reason to believe or hope at this juncture that this budget will certainly revive and if not revive in short term, but it is certainly in the right direction and has initiated a much needed step as far as this sector is concerned.
Bank recapitalization has been announced in this budget. Will this trigger recovery of the bank sector?
On one hand, it is nice to note that government has stated in most unambiguous terms yesterday that government would stand with the public sector banks. So as far as the sovereignty, the credibility, the guarantee of the investors into those banks, whether as a depositor or a shareholder is concerned, government has given them an assurance. But whether such a recapitalization would thrive or would survive or make them banking sector viable is a debatable question, because recapitalization is not a solution. If you look at the banking operations per se, this arises a question in which manner banks first distribute a loan, and secondly, in which manners and at what speed bank recover its loan. Unless and until we as a system are able to improve this problem of recapitalization would keep on reoccurring. And we will have to ask ourselves the question whether it's a job of a government to run a bank, or whether it's a job of a government to recapitalize a bank, or whether a government should have the banks at all. As far as last quarter was concerned, I'm talking about October to December quarter, many banks, whether it is a public sector bank or a private sector bank, whether it's an old bank or a new bank, they have declared left, right and center their net performing assets. These loans must have been given a long time back. On one hand, they are going on declaring the net performing asset. That certainly would clean up their balance sheet, but it has a run on their capital. So governments have to recapitalize it. 2016 happens to be the 25th year of our economic reforms in our country. After 25 years of economic reform, if we have to resort to a government recapitalization of a bank, it raises a question mark on our reform of our banking sector itself. If you see, the government is sincere as far as the financial health is concerned. Government is not taking care only of their capital requirements by way of a recapitalization, but government is providing them one hand or the other hand, by one means or the other means, a revenue business also. But a funny scenario is that a company like Force One is quite profitable, but the promoters thereof, either Subrato Roy or Sahara Group, Malya Group, basically they are the willful defaulters being announced by the central bank. Both the things can't coexist. So certainly in a long run, as far as the banking sector is concerned, there is a huge scope, no doubt about it. Financial inclusion results has shown it. Jan Dhan Yojana, its liquidity has shown it. But there has to be a stricter role along with the recapitalization and revenue allocation business. Unless and until these three things happen together with a clear-cut guideline that after this particular period or after this particular stage, government would not consider recapitalization, banking sector would not stand on its own.
Has enough been done for SME and startups in this budget?
To be honest, it is difficult to define what exactly is enough as far as the SMEs and startups are concerned. I do not want to avoid your question, but startup is a completely new concept. And as far as SMEs are concerned, we are trying to tie up with it. But let us be very honest to ourselves as well as to the government that the sector of SME and startup is such that unless and until it comes to a particular stage, it would be difficult to say whether that would survive or not. Because globally it has been found that when you start 100 startups, only 5 of them materialize. So what, as we generally say in a commercial term, from concept to commercial production, unless and until that entire cycle has been worked out, it is difficult to say whether it would survive or not. But unless and until you start a startup, you will not be able to say whether the startup would succeed or not. But I must say that an honest attempt has been made by the government as far as this budget is concerned for SMEs and startups. Even beside the budget, you would appreciate that a single year budget is not a phenomena to which we looked into as far as the industrial development is concerned. We took it comparatively the longer life cycle for them. But government by way of Make in India, government by way of markets, government by way of tie-ups have done a huge thing for them. It's too early to predict. I can say at this juncture what we can say as a consumer or as a third party, that is certain, that one thing is certain, that after Modi government came to power, they have consistently followed up with SMEs and startups. It has certainly revived the interest among the entrepreneurs, especially the younger ones. It would certainly get certain fillip by way of a private equity or a venture capital, and this thing would move. And in fact, this thing should move, this thing must move. Because it is very clear that in days to come or in the years to come, our competition would be with China. And China sector or a Chinese economy is dominated more by the SMEs rather than the larger economies. Because the SMEs have a certain set of a combination of a features of a industry and a features of a services sector, and that would be needed. Because seeing the changing trends of a consumerism, you will need a certain industry or a size of an industry which is able to absorb a change and which is able to initiate a change. And SMEs are comparatively more nimble footed as far as their operations, their technologies, their owning pattern or their funding pattern is concerned compared to the larger sector of economy. And as we are having a deceleration of a service sector growth on one hand and deceleration of a industrial growth on the other hand, SME is the only solution because it's a combination of between these two sectors. So we should hope that there should be a consistency of efforts as it is in case of a rural and a banking sector earlier.
What are the top two highlights of this budget?
Probably for the first time in the history of budgets of independent India, the central government budget has used a word or a terminology called public transport. I am very much happy, full kudos to Finance Minister, Prime Minister and relevant ministries who forced this particular introduction in budget. Because whether it's a small city, a big city or a metro city, the timings may change, but a traffic jam has created a huge problem, resulting into pollution and excessive demand for the fuel. And fuel market would never be permanently in your favor. So we will have to develop a public transport as in advanced countries. It's the biggest takeaway. It would have impact on the commercial vehicle production. It would have the impact on fuel demands and other things. It would have an impact on our forex reserves, and most importantly, it would have the impact on our deficit figures and subsequently the rate of inflation and other areas. The second takeaway is that the focus of investment cycle in our country, domestic as well as outside, is turning to short term more and max short to medium. But probably after many years, this budget has focused an attention from medium to long term investment, on which any national economy thrives. And especially when you are having the population which contributes, when your service sector contributes 54% of GDP and 82% of your working population is from the services sector and in the age group of 18 to 40, as their shelf life of income is also small, they are certainly moving towards a small term or a short term investment, but a national economy can't thrive on it. So whether it is an NPS, whether it is an superannuation, whether it is a corporate bond, in one form or the other, the government is willy-nilly forcing the investment cycle to medium to long term. If you permit me, I would like to add one more, is that the government has very clearly told that for next 2 to 3 years, this kind of a regime would be there. So as a common man, as a common investor, we'll have to take a clue on it. Right from housing to insurance and from equities to superannuation, it's high time that we take stock of the situation, assess ourselves physically, mentally, psychologically and financially, and plan our investment irrespective of our age, whether we are nearing our retirement or we have just started our commencement. And most importantly, what signals are emanating from this economic scenario is that henceforth investing in India by us or by foreigners or by non-resident Indians has to be medium to long term, has to be a mix of income-based security and capital appreciation-based security. That may be in the nature of a SIP, that may be in the nature of a equity, that may be in the nature of a bond, because the bond market, they are going to deepen, and generally we do not like to do that unless and until it has that tax saving tag. So one has to be very clear that now even if you are going to be having a good interest or a good dividend, then you may term to be a super rich because that 10 lakh limit has been limited. So let us first reach that particular capital acquisition, that particular signal this government is going. And especially after one rank, one pension or a 7th pay commission reports, the income at a larger section of our society at their hand for disposal should also be considered at funds at hand for the investments. That would not only augment a national economy, but that would augment their personal economy as well. This is the most important takeaway as far as this particular budget is concerned.